I caught my mom, who I thought was an angel, having an affair with my father. Now I can't stand her and recognize her as the sociopath she is. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe so that you never miss a video. So, let's get started. I caught my mom, who I thought was an angel, having an affair with my father. Now I can't stand her and recognize her as the sociopath she is. I grew up loving my mother as most sons do. She was protective, compassionate, gorgeous, accomplished, and intelligent, and I aspired to be like her when I was younger. However, I hadn't seen the aspect of her that is at her core in the last 3 years. I've learned to loathe her. She is greedy, manipulative, two-faced, and an all-around nasty person, which is difficult to take after loving her for 25 years. It's strange that you don't really know your parents until you're an adult. This will be lengthy, but if it is only read once in prison, it will have been worthwhile. I simply want to get this off my chest. My folks are in their late 50s. My father is a wealthy company owner who is also a wonderful father to my sisters and me, and is a far better husband than my mother deserves. They had been together since they were in high school. When they were sophomores, my mother practically dragged a girl out of his Jeep and got into it because she wanted to be with him, which was a red flag. He is more docile, although my mother is clearly hostile. Any honeydew, he did it. My mother received anything she wanted. His brother and even I used to make fun of him for being so whipped. When I was 13, my parents went into debt for almost $90,000 because my mother wanted a large house, a Mercedes, and other items they couldn't afford at the time. We took extravagant holidays that she organized. We ate in nice restaurants that we couldn't afford. And the one thing my father ever remained firm on was that he gets to go deer hunting with a guy 3 weekends a year, which my mother still complained about being excluded from. She has always had to be at the center of everything he does in life, with no exceptions. But it was not what made me recognize her for who she was. My now wife and I were about to marry. My mother suggested we all go on a motorcycle vacation one weekend. My father and I frequently travel along with her former coworker, who goes by the name James. She explained that he was going through a difficult period with his ex-wife and needed to escape. We went to have a wonderful time over the weekend, but everything seemed strange. It was my mother, father, my current wife, and James. The relationship and overall mood of being with my mother's old acquaintance seemed bizarre. He was a pleasant enough person. He was tall, attractive, wealthy, and muscular. He had an ex-wife and 2 children around my age, and he enjoyed snapping pictures of my mother and father, which bothered me. Anyway, nothing important happened on this trip. But my mother began acting strangely afterward, which my father and older sister noticed. At the time, I was living with my fiancé on the opposite side of the city, but my older sister was staying with my parents because she was in graduate school and had recently divorced after 1 year of marriage. He was an addict who wasted all of their money. A few weeks after our motorbike journey, my girlfriend's sister mother and I attended an Incubus performance. My mother was acting strangely, wanting to smoke pot and drink beer, which is not typical of her, and just being weird in general. She seemed like a completely different person all of a sudden. After 10 minutes, she says, "I'm going to get a beer," gets up, and leaves for an hour. I started looking for her after she had been gone for 45 minutes, because I was concerned about her safety. And when I returned with no luck, I asked my sister whether she had been able to contact her. She shrugs her eyes and says, "I didn't bother calling, she is probably calling James." She then drops a bombshell, informing me that she and her father assume she is having an affair with him. She goes on to describe how suspicious she has been acting, including changing her phone and iPad passwords, stepping out of phone calls, and whispering. Even putting a fucking jar of nuts in her phone while she slept so she'd be woken up if someone touched it from above. My father was able to peek at her phone before she reset her password, and he rapidly glanced through her text messages with shame, seeing some suspicious cryptic wording. My mother finally contacts us at a performance, and I am both angry and devastated at the same time. I ask her why it took so long. She didn't even have enough beers to laugh for, and she claims I ran into some old pals from my previous employment at _______________, which I immediately suspected was a lie. What are the possibilities that her 50-plus-year-old pal also saw Incubus? So I ask, who? She wasn't expecting this follow-up inquiry, but she responded genuinely with, "You don't know them." Then I inquire, what are their names? She feels the pressure and stutters before coming up with some ridiculous names. My wife and sister are paying close attention to my grilling, while Brandon Boyd sings Pardon Maine in the background. I'm weary of her nonsense and drop it. I am furious, hurt, and thinking of my father. My sister had already reached the point of disdain, so she didn't say anything, and we all sort of disregarded it till the following day. Following the concert incident, my sister informs my father what occurred, and he eventually asks my mother about everything. He wanted to check her call history and stated that she made a 45-minute call to James during the event, along with several others. He demands to know what's going on, and she explains he's simply going through a difficult period with his ex, who is allegedly crippled by alcoholism, and she's just helping him get through it as a friend. Anyway, to keep any readers interested, I'm going to skip over the nonsense that may make this the longest read ever. Essentially, the sketchiness lasts for months. And, at the time of my wedding, my father has a tracker in her Gatham automobile, has requested call Luntz from the phone company, and is considering employing a private investigator. I can vividly remember dancing with her at my wedding. She adored me and I couldn't look back at her. My father and I had no idea that my passion for kayaking would soon provide him with all he needed. A month or two after my wedding, I traveled to visit my old college roommate for a weekend of kayaking and fishing. He resided near my grandparents' lake cottage. My mother's parents said I was going to pick up my kayak for their home that day. My father calls me at random to say hello and most likely to tell me about whatever shady business my mother has been getting up to. They're probably unhealthy. He's my best friend. And this has been our recent conversation. I tell him I'm going to the lake house, and he says, I doubt she'd be this bold, but your mom said she was at the lake house with her girlfriends this weekend, and I want you to be ready. If that's not the case, if it isn't, please let me know. I understood what he meant. I didn't tell my mom that I was going calm on purpose, and when I pulled there I was glad to see only her car and another curly-looking car in the driveway. Before I go in, I call my father and inform him that based on what I see, nothing suspicious is happening. It appears like she and her buddies are here. He has this, and I am relieved. I walked up and knocked on the door, and it was silent. The rear patio door was locked. So I strolled in. The first thing I notice is a leather motorcycle jacket hanging from one of the bar tools, which immediately identifies James. My heart starts pounding and my adrenaline rushes as my vision blurs and my ear burns. A million questions race through my mind in a split second, including, are they here? Do they know I am here? Should I introduce myself? God damn it, my mother, you fucking horrible ass soul. I act quickly, presuming they are not there but may arrive at any time. I snap a picture of the jacket, go to the garage, and there's James' motorcycle. I take a picture of it and then rush back in to find cell phones tapped. They're charging in the kitchen. I grab a phone that I don't recognize. It didn't have a lock, so go straight to the photographs. The first one shows two persons I don't recognize, as well as my mother and James, kissing each other on the lips. I scroll a little more and find more of the same stuff. My heart is beating out of my chest at this point. I take a few fast photos of the images and phone before fleeing the house, having no idea why I was there in the first place. Something I should mention is that when I was 7 years old, my mother abandoned my father for a doctor who only intended to use and dump her like a terrible habit, and my father reluctantly accepted her back after she begged and pleaded. She blamed the doctor at the time, claiming he was intoxicated, raped her, or anything. My father subsequently told me that he told himself he was doing it for the kids, and meant to leave her once we left high school, but they performed so well in the interim that he eventually forgave her and was content with their relationship. I recall them being separated. However, I was unaware of the details until lately. Okay, so I pull out of the driveway at a lake house and drive to the saluted street in the area, trying to figure out what to do. I let my heart rate settle down, so that I can think clearly. I next called my sister, trying to decide whether I should inform my father and, if so, how. Everyone had suspicions up to this moment, but there was no real proof. My younger sister, who is the sweetheart of the family, believes that I ought to call Dad and inform him right away because he deserves to know, no matter how much it will pain him. I contacted my wife, and she agreed, but we were both concerned about what he would do. I hesitate for a moment, but eventually I phone my father to inform him that his wife of 25 years is cheating on him. When he responds, I simply blurt it out. James is here. I have proof that Mom is cheating on you. I didn't know how to pit it, so I just told him the facts. He was not as astonished as I was. He repeated the same statement over and over. No fucking way. God darn it. Insert my mother's name. God darn it. Wow, son of a bitch. God darn it. After the first shock wears off, he apologizes that I had to witness that and says he's on his way. It's a 3-hour drive, and he'll meet me at my roommate's. I quickly phone my uncle, my father's identical twin, and my other best friend to explain what is going on. I tell him I am frightened my father will do something dumb. He promised not to do so. They end up coming down together and meeting me at my roommate's place. We discuss for a few hours and devise a plan. They switch tracks with my roommate to go incognito so he can see it for himself. My father pledges that he will not do anything dumb, no matter what he sees. He sneaks up there. After dusk, Parks fires away and wanders a mile through the woods with his brother and binoculars. He hides behind some trees as he arrives and notices them in a pacule, with another couple drinking wine. They are snuggling and kissing like an elderly married couple, as if what they are doing isn't fucked up. It took all of my father's self-control not to run over there and go mad on them. Instead, he did the prudent thing. Fortunately, it only took pictures of them and went. The next morning, he cleaned their bank account and sent her the photos. He and I followed along with what the text said. I knew everything, and I'm leaving you. I can only image how they reacted. I can promise you that the rest of their short vacations were pretty hectic. The following year was a nightmare for everyone, and my mother's reaction just strengthened my dislike for her. She dragged everyone into her nonsense and made our lives a living misery. My father and I caught her red-handed. He only wanted her to go to James and let him go in peace, but instead she abandoned him and asked my father to take her back. My father agreed to pay her alimony if she granted him a divorce through the attorneys, which would have devastated them both financially. She hesitantly agrees. After the divorce, my mother sobbed every day for a year. She moved in with my younger sister in an apartment that she could not afford. She took antidepressants and fell into a downward spiral that, because we loved her unconditionally, carried us all along with her. All of the lies she had spoken over the previous year began to appear. Thinking back on that motorcycle ride where I spent a weekend with this jerk made my stomach twist. I even purchased the rich asshole whiskey and coke. Though I detested who she was and what she had done, I remained concerned for my mother and would listen to her sob, on the phone and in front of me. She wept a lot to my wife, which annoyed me. This was my wife's first year in the family, and my mother was calling her to cry about how terrible my father was to her. My mother blamed my father's twin brother for practically everything, claiming that he had snatched him away from her on call-hour hunting trips and was the reason their marriage failed. She was truly manic. My mother's parents and brother were disgusted with her since they adored my father and refused to talk to her about him. So my wife's sister, father, and I were the ones who bore the brunt of it. She attempted to manipulate everyone to make us believe she was the victim here. It made me nauseous. She tried to make it appear as if she was the superior wife and my father had mistreated her. We all knew the truth, and I grew to despise her as a person. My father, on the other hand, went full-on fat boy with his newfound independence. He is a wealthy and attractive individual. Though my mother's reaction was taking its toll on him in every way, he distracted himself by becoming unbumble and banging a bunch of 304 ladies, hunting every weekend, and going on long rides during the week to get away from it all. My mother still has no idea about the women, and honestly, after being with the same lady for 30 years, been cheated on twice, and having every area of his life controlled, he deserves it. I needed to get it out of my system. Anyway, moving back to the present, my wife and I became pregnant with our first kid, and the excitement was utterly eclipsed by my mother's continuous meltdowns. I couldn't even get them to the same room to announce to the rest of my family that they were expecting a new niece or granddaughter. For 10 months, she aggressively chastised my father for being unable to forgive her, and she used my unborn child, their first grandchild, as a pawn to win him back. She informed him that it would be his fault if their grandchild grew up with divorced grandparents. It made my blood boil. After a while, despite my and my sister's encouragement for my father to remain strong, he caved and began to cautiously reconnect with her. They sold their home. They currently live together in a townhouse. My daughter is now 17 months old, and my parents have reverted to their previous relationship in which my mother dominates his life. Despite his efforts to establish firm ground rules this time, it's been similar to when a valiant regains their power after losing it. She moved from being weak and damaged to manipulating everyone around her, just like she always did. Your wife is shy, compassionate, and always concerned about offending my family in any manner. And my mother used this to attempt to order her about when it came to our daughter, until I intervened. She'll continuously play the guilt game about my wife's parents seeing our daughter more because they live 4 hours away. Oh, you fucking psycho. They are good folks. When I talk to my mother now, there is no love in my voice. I don't want to despise her, yet her weaknesses are obvious. She is a sociopath who seeks to exert control over everyone. We all love her despite this, but I am the only one who calls her out on her lies. My older sister rarely speaks to her. My daughter is obsessed with her right now, which makes me both thrilled and irritated. She does not deserve my father. And she does not deserve our forgiveness, especially after we have learned that she cheated on my father twice. I'm not sure how to end this. I wish my mother wasn't such a shitbag. I think I'm glad these events and my revelation did not happen sooner. Otherwise, I would not be aware that there are good ladies out there. Instead, I would probably have trouble believing them. If you've read this far, thank you.